Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to see so many of you here for our webinar titled Publishing as a Practitioner. And so this event is brought to you by the ACPA 100 Committee as part of our ACPA 100 celebration. And so I wanted to get us started with our land acknowledgement. Oops. And I'm also doing the behind the scenes tech job of admitting folks, so bear with me. But I'm going to move everything so I can see my land acknowledgement and read it. Related to our mission of supporting and fostering learning through the generation and sharing of knowledge, ACPA College Student Educators International would like to acknowledge that the land each of us is on today is the original homelands of Indigenous and tribal nations. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from these territories, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples still connected to this land. Before we dive into the content for our webinar, please take a moment to honor and acknowledge the Native and Indigenous peoples from the land you are on. Give some thought to your ancestry and the generations that came before you. Ponder how you can continue to decolonize your work on your campus. And so if you would like to, please in the chat, introduce yourself and also acknowledge the land from which you are joining us today. And so again, one more thing before we dive into the actual content of the webinar, I just wanted to point out some of the highlights of our ACPA 100 celebration. If you haven't listened into our podcast series yet, we've been co-sponsoring a podcast series with Student Affairs Now for 13 podcasts, and about a little over half of them have already been released. And so you can find all of that on our ACPA 100 website, which you have the link on the bottom. Our Journal for College Student Development also came out with a special issue, and we hosted a webinar about that and have that webinar recording up on our website. And then we also have our Unsung Champions recognition. And so if there's someone in your life who's maybe encouraged you to consider publishing or supported you in your journey as a scholar practitioner, you can submit an Unsung Champions nomination, and then these folks will be recognized via social media in the upcoming months. And so we encourage you to join us in some of these celebratory events. And now I'm going to stop sharing. All right. And so we still have more folks joining us. So this is really exciting to see so many people here. We have also 4 amazing panelists that are joining us today. And so what we have planned for this session is to start off with some panel discussion, people sharing kind of how they are related to this topic and opportunities that exist for publishing for practitioners. We'll have some time for Q&A from the audience, and then we're going to hop into some breakout rooms. So depending on what your interests are, you can explore different topics in a little bit more depth. But so that's our plan for today. Again, please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself. Please also feel free to use the chat if you have questions. I'll try to keep an eye on that as well. And like I said, towards the end of the panel, we'll leave some time for Q&A from the audience. So if there's burning questions that you have, we'll make sure we leave time for that. But to get us started, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. And so if you could share with us your name, pronouns, current position and title, and just a little bit about your experience with publishing. And Juan, why don't you kick us off?
Hello, everyone. My name is Yuan Zhou. My English pronouns are she, her, and hers. Hope y'all having a good start of the weekend, of the week so far. I'm already on the weekend, so. But I am currently serving as the Director of Residential Living here at Sul Ross State University in the homeland of the Jumanos. And in terms of my experience with publication, I actually first got started with Gudrun, actually got me into this. I was entry level, wanted to really get back into the publication, wanted to learn how that's like after grad school, right? And so since then, I've been on a few projects since and have either articles or book chapters and things like that. published. So super exciting.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle, would you like to go next?
I would love to go next. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Happy to see you here. I'll be honest, it's July, and I thought it would be the five of us here just sort of chatting and then saying goodbye. So this is phenomenal. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently an associate professor at Clemson University. And as far as my experience with publishing, I do it as part of my job, but my role, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about working with developments. One of the things I really love to do is to work with newer authors, and especially students and practitioners, because I think so often we get in our heads that there's one way to write and there's one way to publish, and that's just not the case. And the stories of the people who are currently doing the work, I worry sometimes we lose those because of the formality of some scholarly outlets. So that's my background. That sort of is who I am as a faculty member. But really happy to be here and excited to talk with you all, and very pleased to have been invited into such good company today. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Cristobal, would you like to go next?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Chris Salinas. I'm a full professor at Florida Atlantic University. And my pronouns are he, him, his. My experience with publishing as a faculty, I'm evaluated by publishing, right? So I think my percentage in research is 60 or 70%. So most of my job is to publish, or how I get evaluated every year. And then in terms of my other experiences, I am the founder and former editor-in-chief for the journal committed to social change on race and ethnicity. And I'll put the link in the chat in a second. And we are celebrating 10 years of this journal. So it's really exciting to see that a journal that I created is making such an impact in our field. But also this project emerged when I was a doctoral student, because a lot of the research that I was doing with Latino, Hispanic communities, mainstream journals were rejecting it, that it was too Latino focused. And then we did, of course, our research, and we heard similar voices that we needed more research. So NCORE, the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, sponsored me with a grant. So we launched this journal. But now I'm still working closely with them, and I'll be speaking about the peer review publication in JC Score. But I'm also now the new editor for the Journal of Hispanics Higher Education, published by SAGE.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. And Calvin.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you all today. My name's Kelvin. I use he, him, his pronouns. I currently serve as the Interim Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven, Connecticut, which is about 90 minutes northeast of New York City, in the traditional homelands of the Quinnipiac and Pagasic peoples. I found my publishing pathway start out in actually journals that were more focused for practitioners. So some of my early publishing was through the journal through the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and the Journal of College Orientation and Transition. And so that sparked this idea of how to really marry practice with scholarship. And as I've grown throughout the profession, finding more kind of capacity to contribute to book chapters and articles in progress. So just kind of happy to share that journey and finding the ways that make sense for where you are in your journey.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And I realized I got so excited, I just jumped right in and didn't even introduce myself. So I'm Gudrun Jund. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of the ACPA 100 steering committee. I'm also a faculty member at Northern Illinois University. And so obviously I publish as a faculty, but I've had the opportunity to publish with some wonderful practitioner colleagues, and really always enjoyed that collaboration, because it forces me as a faculty member, right, to get back to my practitioner roots and really think about things through a practical lens. And so I think there's a lot of value in these collaborations. And so I'm just really excited to have all of you here to talk about, right, how can we foster publishing for practitioners, because it's something that ACPA as an association truly values, that we talk about a lot, right? But we also know there's some barriers to helping practitioners come into publishing. And so my first question for the panel is, why do you think it's important for practitioners to publish? And who would like to jump in and get us started?
I'm happy to say something. I beat you, Chris. Haha. And I'll just make one comment and leave space for others. But when you think about the knowledge of what really is happening in practice in higher education in the lives of college students, I was a practitioner for a long time. I was in housing and then student conduct, and I knew my stuff, right? And I'm still aware and informed, and I try to stay as current as I can, but I'm not doing it every day. And I think if we rely on faculty to be publishing about what's going on, the time between, coming up with your research idea, potentially a research team, submitting to IRB, collecting the data, analyzing, and then taking it to publication. By the time we go through those steps, what we collected is 2 years old, easily, right? That's if you get published quickly. So I think when we're looking to practitioners, if we're doing traditional scholarship, we have to have practitioners in that with us, whether it's as a formal part of the writing team or not, just to help us make sure that we're asking good and relevant questions. And then again, looking at the variety of outlets, and I really appreciated what Kelvin talked about, different professional organization publications, whether it's a magazine or a newsletter or whatever, your time to publication is very quick. So you're getting the word out in time for people to put it into practice and really maximize its utility. So those are some things for me. I also like practitioners, and sometimes you need a break from talking to faculty to talk to practitioners. So I'll throw that in there too, but I'll stop with that. But that's the first thing that came to mind when you mentioned that question. So I'm good.
I'll jump in quickly. So as a faculty, I struggle with some of the practitioner pieces because I'm very theoretical, right? I've been socialized to think about very theory. And I think one of the things that as an editor too, and as a scholar, good research has to have practices. And one of the things that practitioner pieces. But one of the points that Michelle brings is like the journals can take up to 2 to 3, 4, 5 years to get published. By the time that it's published, the practice piece or promising practices might be delayed. So I do support and I believe that we need to publish outside of peer-reviewed publications, right? Because that's scholarship as well. However, as a faculty, I'm only evaluated on peer-reviewed publications. So that's one component that as a faculty I have to keep in mind of how am I evaluated in my job, but two, the impact that if I want to make an impact with practitioners, I have to be publishing in different outlets. So I hope that all of you think about not only peer-reviewed publications, peer-reviewed journals, but think about blogs, think about open news. I mean, there's so many outlets nowadays that can happen. But I know I struggle with some of the practitioner piece, and I have collaborated with Michelle Batcher, and she's really good at it. She pushes my thinking in that perspective. But I'm a slow writer in that perspective. Theoretically, I can engage on that, but in the practice, that's when I invite my colleagues or my friends to go out there with me because I acknowledge that I'm limited in that perspective.
I'll offer two things. I think as a practitioner, two things really resonate for me. So coming from, again, Chris's theoretical perspective, I'm really fond of the practice to theory to practice model, right? We need practitioners contributing to the PTP model so that scholarship is generated, right? And so I think oftentimes, as I think back to my graduate experience, both at the master's and doctoral level, of being able to find that literature that just really wasn't speaking to what I really wanted to write at, right? I'm seeing this in the Career Center, or I'm seeing this work in cultural centers, and it's just not in the literature. And so how do we invite those conversations into like an academic or a literature-based space? And then second, I think one of the things I'm really committed to is that what does it mean to create accessible pathways to knowledge, right? And so as a practitioner, not every person has the opportunity to go to a conference, and everyone has the opportunity to go to a drive-in or a webinar, right? But pathways towards news media articles or journals gives us pathways to consume content and to consume knowledge. And so I think as a practitioner, having that responsibility to continue to share thought leadership or perspectives that can help improve others across the country and the world is really important.
And one quick thing I just wanted to add is that because we don't see, we're right, like we don't, or we choose whatnot, either way, whatever the answer is, we don't see a lot of practitioners writing. And so as you're writing, you can be that motivation for someone else. I feel like I used to be in that seat of really never see anyone done it. You know, everyone at work is talking about working. You know, I'm not in PhD. I can't do this. I can't do that. But once I started, then I spread that, right? Like spread that experience with other people. And now I feel like people around me are doing it. And we're like, this is what we're looking for. And so there's that importance in that too, is being that, set that role model and set that stage for others around you.
Yeah, thank you all. And so we already had a comment in the chat, right, about how it's really tricky as a practitioner to find the time to publish. And so this question, perfect segue to the next question I have planned, right? Calvin and Juan, for the two of you, how have you found the time and to navigate that publication process and make that part of what you do?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So I think three big things that have really been important to me. So one, finding an accountability writing partner is critical for me. Not in the sense of like, oh, we're going to meet on Zoom at 10 p.m. to write or 10 a.m., but more is who will periodically check on you to say, how are you making progress or where are you getting stuck in your writing? So that periodic invitation to just someone who's going to invite you to think about your scholarly voice or your scholarly practice is a great tip that has kept me on track. Two, I've had to reckon with what does it mean to dedicate time to write versus what does it mean to dedicate time to think. So I am a better thinker post work. I am a better writer before work. And learning that task for me was really important. In terms of being able to contribute in terms of book chapters and knowledge production that I found that was really important for me as a practitioner. And then third, I think it's really sitting with and contending for what manner or what pathway do you want to offer knowledge, right? So for me, publishing in peer-reviewed academic journals has not been a priority for me as much as contributing to book chapters or practice journals, because that's where I found like my voice really resonates. So finding that audience that you really feels like and connected can kind of take the pressure off, right? So while yes, would it be love to have the goal of publishing a journal for college student development? Of course, a top tier journal. But my daily doesn't really apply to that, nor does my desire. And so really thinking about what is the modality or the pathway for publication and how does that align with your values or what your interests are has really helped me in terms of reaching publication goals.
For me, I would say, yeah, have a relationship with your editor. I feel like they are your best account. To me, it was good. And so I'm like, I'm so sorry. I feel like I ghosted you for weeks, you know, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, I cannot let my friend down. Right. And so when you have, right, either that's accountability partner, friends, or whoever, it's like, I cannot let them down kind of thing. I have a deadline that I have to meet. But I would say really, you know, foster that relationship with right, whoever's leading the project or your co-author, whatnot, just to that communication is going to be helpful. We all know that it's up and down. I still remember the first publication I did, I really dedicated my winter break. I was like, I locked myself in Starbucks for like days. I'm like sponsored by that location in San Francisco. And also, yeah, other coffee shop that I'm like, I'll be there, you know, to write all day. So I think that and knowing your writing style and having I would probably just like, a lot of different places that, don't try to do everything at work. You might get too overwhelmed just doing everything in one setting. So if you need to really just find different settings to get things done for yourself, do so. But mine was also helpful where my supervisor at the time is also a PhD student. And so there are also a lot of time where I, kind of share what I'm doing with her, so we can talk through, some of that processes. And I think it's just helpful to know too that, right, like she values that and kind of is helping me, cheer me on the side as well. But I would say in terms of finding ways, finding opportunities, I really definitely use, me attending conferences to really connect with our faculty. In the different organizations I'm part of, we have a lot of faculty and residents who that's how they are they always know what's going on, who's calling out for proposals, calling out for what. And so they always, once I share that, hey, I have an interest in writing, because that's just my life goal in general. Like I want to write, like I want to get published. That's my life goal. And so, once I share that, I feel like then they, keep you in mind of what's your interest, what your functional areas, or just outside interests as well. And then they would, right, once you have that relationship with them, then they, look out for you. So I really do appreciate that personal connections that I have made with people.
Yeah, awesome. And so we actually have a follow-up question in the chat, which asks, what are some best practices to continuously connect your practice to your research focus and not feel overwhelmed?
I can jump in really quick as I was thinking about what my colleagues said. My colleagues mentioned, I think for me, well, let me go back, right? So English is my second language, and I learned English when I was in 8th grade. So getting my doctorate or even my master's was very intimidating because my writing still was, my grammar, it's still not the best, right? But that's why we have editors, that's why my colleagues read my work often. I get feedback. I know it's a lot of labor for them as well, but I've only been able to be successful with the support of other people. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think about this is that I learn to read every day or every other day, a book chapter or an article or something a day, right? So I write, as I read, I write notes. So it would, because there's so much to read, there's always something going on. But I had to learn that reading is part of my writing, right? Because it informs my thinking, it informs my writing, it informs my research, my goals. So I also schedule 2 or 3 days a week for research only. Oh, and that includes, when I say research, that includes reading, writing, or anything that has to play a role within in that context. So reading is writing time. That's one thing. And the other thing that I think about is the process. So let me think about the best practice that I have to, as a scholar, as a writer, I learn when my thinking is the fresh. As a grad student, I was best thinker at nights. I guess I got socialized to that. But now I know I'm a better writer and thinker in the mornings, right? So in the morning, I usually go to the gym, work out, whatever, or do my run, and then I read and write before I even open emails or anything. But that's something that I had to learn within my career. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and then I'll pass to other colleagues because they have a lot to share as well, is that I graduated from Iowa State, my PhD, with 0 publications, right? If I could go back, I would probably be more intentional at making those relationships with faculty to engage on research, or other people that were engaged on research and publications, to have a competitive resume, right? I think back, 8-10 years ago, things have changed over the last 10 years. But if you want, I think goes back to the best practices, but depends on your personal goals. If you want to be faculty, then I encourage all of you to publish in peer review articles, because that is what will count, what the search committee will consider most.
I'm never going to be. I'm not that person. And I think.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on how we connect practice to research interests?
Yeah, I would just add, So I did my doctoral program while I was writing full time. Think about your research as broadly as you possibly can. I think sometimes people get too narrowly focused, and especially as a practitioner scholar, what are you talking about in your work? What are you struggling with when you spend time with colleagues? What issues are coming up? That's going to help you make those connections, because whatever it is that consumes your thinking, positively or negatively, that probably is what you would thrive in writing about. I'm guessing almost everybody on this call, you could be assigned a topic and you have the skill, you have the persistence probably to write an article about that topic. But it is so much easier when it's something that you care about. So in response to the question, I would say, whatever your practice is, if you are, I'm a journaler. So maybe at the end of the day, you write down one or two things that you were thinking about, or that took your time, or that you got excited about, and then look at patterns over time. And that way you're connecting your practice to the writing. Your practice is literally setting the stage for your writing. So that would be my thought. And I saw Dr. Iverson wrote, write with other people. I highly recommend that. I will offer a word of caution that I was very surprised as a faculty member how hard it was to find people that I enjoyed writing with. My friend Dr. Salinas here and we write really well together. The things he talked about that he doesn't maybe have the most energy around, or he struggles with a little bit more, that's my stuff. The theory and the conceptualization pieces, I can do it. I just don't love it. Whereas he's really strong in that. But it's not just strengths and weaknesses, it's style. I am more accountable and I will hit a deadline when I'm writing with someone else much more easily than if it's just me holding myself accountable. So explore those things. But really, if you want to connect your research to your work, start with the work and then figure out, what are you curious about? What are you struggling with? What really just kind of gets your emotions going? And that will help you sort of refine and make those connections.
I also just want to offer, I think it's really important to ask yourself the question, do you want your research to actually be connected with your work? And because for me in my current research project, it has absolutely nothing to do with my position at all. So I appreciate the opportunity to let go of my day work to kind of invite myself for different types of conversations, for different types of ideation as well. And so I think it's really important just to hear in the space, you have a right to not choose your work as your research agenda as well, and invite yourself in to consider something as well. So I'm always how do you continuously check in and making sure that you've affirmed your choice, not just go through the process because it's what's been presented to you?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Kelvin, right? And I think some of it is we create this like one true story, right? And hierarchies in higher education where we say you have to do it this way. And really you don't. Like figure out what works for you, right? If it's connected to your practice, if it's something you're doing and you're passionate, you want to write about it, write about that. If you want to just try something totally different, do that, right? Even as a faculty member, when people ask me what my research is, I always like stumble over that. Even now as an associate professor, but because I'm like, it depends on, right? Like this year I was interested in this. And so I studied that. And then one of my practitioner friends said, hey, here's this thing I'm dealing with. And there's not a lot of research on it. And I was like, oh, cool, I can study this, right? Let's do it. So my research is a little bit all over the place, right? And unless you want to be a faculty at a research one institution, top tier kind of thing, right? There's a lot more flexibility in what that process looks like. And particularly for many of you who are looking at it through a scholar practitioner lens, right? You can publish on one topic one day, you can publish on something totally different the next day. Like, don't feel like you have to do it that one way. So yeah. And I see we're also having conversations in the chat, which is wonderful. So please keep that going. If you have questions, feel free to chat with each other. I'm going to turn it over to Chris and ask you if you can tell us a little bit about the journal committed to social justice, so social change on race and ethnicity, and kind of what the aims of the journal are, and also tell us a little bit about what that peer review process looks like for your publication.
Yes. So first, I think one of the things that I want to, going back to the, and then I'll answer your question. One of the things that I think about is we all have so many ideas because we're all engaging with our world, right? We're engaging with our work, we're engaging with people. So I always think about research, it's me search. So if I look, I'm going to speak for myself. I look at my research, all my research papers are connected to my experiences or my social identities. So because of that, I have always kept a journal for my research ideas. So for example, I wanted to get my dissertation on hazing, but at the time my faculty said, you know, you're setting yourself for working at a fraternity and sorority life, right? Again, a myth, but that was not my goal, to work in fraternity and sorority life. Although I'm in a fraternity, my goal was to be faculty. So I changed my topic, but then I co-edited a book with Michelle here as well, my colleague, on hazing, right? So although my research or my expertise has been on Latino, Latina, Latinx identity, I have published in different topics, but I go back when I need something exciting or something like, oh, I need something different, I go back to those topics, right? Or when I find a colleague or a call for proposals that are looking for one of those research ideas, I jump into that. And I've been criticized by other faculty by that because I have different areas. But again, I think about what makes me happy and what I enjoy, not what am I doing to please my colleagues academically. But the Journal of JC Score, the Journal Committed to Social Change on Race and Ethnicity, like I said, we are celebrating 10 years. It is published in partnership with the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity. So when we think about the aims and scope, it is research that focuses on race and ethnicity in higher education. Or scholarship, but we are a very non-traditional, well, I want to say non-traditional research outlet because we publish also poetry. We publish also, for example, we have different, we have one article of a indigenous scholar who is mute, and her scholarship is in a YouTube video, and it is using American Sign Language, right? So we do publish a variety of different type of non-traditional scholarship. So that's something that we are working on or we have done. The peer review publishing is really a process, right? So you submit your paper or your scholarship, which we publish a variety of traditional research. Also, we publish theoretical pieces, practice pieces, poetry, like I said, or many other things. However, if you decide to go that route, because I know that reviewers, they look for a strong background on the literature review. So what do we know? What has been published? And why is, even if it's a practitioner piece, why is this important, but what has been done before? So that's one thing that oftentimes people missed in the process. Even if it's a literature review, what were the methods, the methodology to get to the literature review? So that's always what the reviewers look for. So the paper is submitted, and then I'm no longer the editor, but as the editor, I send it. It goes first. We read the editorial team will review the paper, and if we believe it meets the standards to send out for review, we will send it to two or three reviewers. It's all blinded, so make sure that all your information is not included in the original paper, but you submit a cover page in a separate page. Then we seek for reviewers that are experts or that might have experience in your topic or methodology. And then they give me advice, they give the editor advice on if it should be revised or resubmit, rejected, or other or accept with no edits, which that hardly ever happens, hardly ever. So, but if you get a revising resume, that's good, right? I remember my first revising resume, I was so hurt that I never looked at it and I left it alone. But that's part of the system, right? If you want to be in academia and publishing, it is full of rejections. So it is part of the game. So that's something else to keep in mind. So then that reviewers, the experts, will make decisions, and then I make a decision. If that reviewers contradict themselves, then I have to look for another reviewer to get another perspective, right? So that's how the process works. But now, so after COVID, I have noticed that reviewers are less likely to review, or they are taking to agree to review a paper, or they are taking longer than usual, right? So that's the other part, that it's this peer review publishing can take from 1 year up to 3 or 4 years to get a paper published, right? And then you can control that. So once I get a paper and let's say it gets accepted, I would put it in the queue, and some journals will publish it right away automatically. It goes online first, but it's not assigned to an issue. So for example, your paper can be published today, but it is not assigned to an issue. It will be assigned to a 2026 issue, but it's published. In other journals, it is published, it won't be published until it's assigned in an issue, right? So it's a variety of different methods that there are. Now, JC Score is an open access journal. There are many other journals that are open access, which means that anyone has access to them. You don't need a library to get access to them. But also, we have no fee for authors. So everything's covered by ANCOR, the National Conference of Race and Ethnicity, and University of Oklahoma. But if there's a big stigma against publishing in open access journals where you have to pay, right? So be careful on that perspective. I mean, everyone has different perspectives, different philosophies, but as faculty, it's like you paid someone to publish your work, right? Rather than going through that rigorous process of getting reviewed and accepted or rejected. But one of the things that also Yuan mentioned, be nice to your editors. You'll be surprised how many mean messages I get, emails or rude emails from the authors to the editor, right? But the other thing that as the editor I have to do there's also some mean reviewers, right? So oftentimes I have to clean some of that feedback because it's just not helping the scholar. So when I think about as a reviewer or as an editor, it should be developmental of helping the author to improve your scholarship and to make it publishable. If it's not in my outlet, there's many more outlets, but still, you should always get feedback to make it better.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And so, Michelle, you are the editor of Developments, which is one of our ACPA publications. Could you tell us a little bit about what the process of publishing with Developments looks like?
Absolutely. A couple of things. I was going to respond to Dr. Williams posted a question about being outside of higher ed. And my advice is certainly that's not going to be an obstacle to publishing. It's more about what are you writing about and is it relevant to the audience of the journal? So, for example, if you wanted to write a piece about the transferability of skills from student affairs to higher ed adjacent, that would be a great article for a student affairs publication. It really is not so much about where you're coming from as remembering who you're talking to through a specific journal and making sure your topic is going to be relevant to the audience. And the best way for anybody to figure out, is this the right journal for me to publish in? Read it. Read what they've published before. You'll get an idea of the topics, the style, things like that. Okay, so as far as developments, all of the mean things that Chris said about his journal, we're the opposite of that. Okay. And he's an excellent editor, and the idea of cleaning up feedback. Once you get into this world, you'll start seeing memes about reviewer 2 who's always just really mean and unkind. And I will say, I believe in my heart, most of us want to help people publish. Now, you might submit something to the journal that Chris is an editor for that it's just not the right fit. But you may get some feedback about, we hope that you'll continue to pursue this work. Here are some other outlets that you might consider. We try to do the same thing. Developments is a little bit different type of publication because we publish a lot of reflective pieces and essays. The December-January issue, the last 2 years, and we're going to keep doing this because it works really well, is just case studies. So if you want to write for publication and you're not really sure what that is going to feel like, how much time you can commit, a case study might be the way to go. They're pretty short. You can go and look. You have to be an ACPA member to access developments. I think all of our publications actually, but go in and look at the past issues. You'll get an idea of the format. If you and a friend have a situation that you want to write about, do that, and you can at least experience what it's like to go through the writing process. And then if you want to do something, or you may have an idea now about a particular topic that you want to write about. There's a piece that will come out in the next issue on supporting international students. And it's 2 international students who got together and said, you know what, let's talk about what, specifically graduate students who are international students. And so they wrote about their own experiences. And then in developments, we like to have there be a takeaway of some kind. So you can end with reflection questions. You can end with next steps. Maybe you provide some resources for people to check out. But it really is, I think developments is a good place to test the waters. We work really closely with authors. We give a lot of feedback, both like about the idea, but also about kind of how you're going to structure it. You're going to get some editing feedback. And our audience is primarily graduate students and new professionals, and the faculty who teach them and the supervisors who work with them. So when you're thinking about, is this the right outlet? Does it touch on that audience? Does it, maybe it speaks to someone beyond that entry level position that's supervising grad students or newer professionals? But you get a lot of support with developments, and it's rare that we won't publish something if someone is persistent. Like there are times where someone will submit a draft, we'll give feedback, and we just don't hear from them again. We also occasionally, we will get, for the students in this conversation, we'll get somebody who will just submit a paper from a class. It's an okay way to start, but that's not what's going to get published because it's a different purpose, right? Usually when you're writing a paper for class, it's to showcase your understanding of a concept or how you're going to apply knowledge or something like that. This, you have to take it, it's putting it more into practice and having it be very practical and more utilitarian, I guess. The other thing is, and I really appreciate that Chris mentioned the poetry aspect. We will have our first poetry coming out in the next issue. A couple of people at UNC got together, and like there are student pieces, there are practitioner pieces, but it's a whole set of poetry that the staff and students there got together and contributed to. We've also done a couple of pieces of artwork. I would love to do more things like that. We just don't get a lot of submissions along those lines. I would say if you have an idea and you want to explore it, we come to us and talk to us. If our audience matches your interest, then come meet with us, talk with us, and let's help build something together. The other thing, and this is not about development specifically, but I think I saw in the chat, someone talked about book chapters. That's another really great way to explore writing for publication too. And when developments comes out, it comes out quarterly. And there's almost always something in there from our publications team. And so they'll be sharing ideas they're available to consult with. But pay attention to those calls for book chapters, because that can be a really rewarding way to, it almost bridges the two, right? You're going to have to be knowledgeable about the literature, but a lot of times they want to know the reality of the practice or the implications. And I'll stop there in case there are other questions, but happy to talk more about developments and how we get to partner with people to take their work to publication.
Any other questions? Where the plan is to at least briefly hop into breakout rooms, but I want to make sure we get to questions that all of you have. And I see there's one in the chat that says, what support is available for international graduate students who are planning on pursuing an academic career in the US, especially those wanting to become faculty members? Sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Does anyone want to tackle that?
I would just suggest as one resource, the graduate school or the graduate college at the institutions that you're interested in. I know here at Clemson, they have a lot of different workshops. They have some mentoring programs and some different opportunities for graduate students specifically. And so, you know, I think honestly, if you find an institution, go online, look at faculty CVs, and if there's somebody whose area of scholarship is something that sort of fits with what you want to do, there's nothing wrong with just sending kind of a cold email and saying, hey, I'm interested. This is what drew me to asking you about this. What guidance can you give me? Because I will tell you, if I got that email, I would have some information. I would probably send them contact information at the graduate school, and I would put that person in touch with some of our current international graduate students, because I know what I think I know, but that's not my experience. And I always try to give people the most accurate sort of source of insight for that. But it's probably honestly going to be on you, unless like the places that I've worked and the information I have is sort of an outlier batch. I think it might be hard to find exactly what you're looking for in terms of just click this button. You're probably going to have to do a little bit of outreach and again, show some persistence, and eventually you'll find the right person that will make the right connections or give you the answer to some of the questions that you have. I hope that's a little bit helpful.
Yeah, thank you all. And we had a question about if there's a directory of journals, and there's not really like one official place, right, where all journals are listed. There's some informal Excel documents floating around in the field that faculty usually have or share with students. Part of it, I would say, look at the journals that you're reading, right? So if you're interested in legal issues, what were some interesting articles that you've read related to legal issues and where were those published, right? That usually helps you find, this is where I might want to consider publishing. And so I want to give us a little bit of chance for like smaller conversations. So I'm going to open up. Hang on, Sammy. My kids are hanging out with me, so there's lots happening. But I'm going to open up some breakout rooms. We're going to send Chris to one. So if you want to learn more about J-Score, that would be the one to go to. We'll send Michelle to another one for developments. And then Kelvin and Juan will be in one if you want to continue the conversation with them about publishing as a practitioner. And then if you feel like you just want to connect with folks and brainstorm research topics, there'll be another breakout room for that as well. And so I'm going to open the rooms. And then you should be able to just pick the one that you would like to go to. No.
Nobody wants to brainstorm research topics.
That's all right.
This was great, and there was a great turnout. Good job.
Yeah, this was really fun. Woo. And Sammy has played with slime and now is all upset that his hands are slimy.
Awesome.
I'm sorry. Oh, when we play with slime, our slime's. Hi. No, no, it's not good.
Poor Sammy.
Like we were perfectly content and happy for the first 45 minutes. and
Yeah,
then
they did great. I'm impressed.
Lily's been watching something. So she's at that age where if you put a screen in front of her, she's
That's
done
fine. Yeah.
good for hours until I have to like drag her away. He's like, he'll watch with her for, 15 minutes. And then he's like, no, I want to do stuff.
Right. Well, I'm gonna hop because Carol's group has a meeting on the hour, but
Okay.
this was great. Good
Yeah,
job.
thanks for coming.
I'm glad we had such a good turnout. Thanks for putting it together.
Yeah. Okay, buddy, it's okay. I know you. You wanna go wash hands? No, no wash hands. I'm not all done. If you're still hanging out in the main room, there's breakout rooms open, so you should be able to just. I know, honey, I'll help you in a second. You should be able to just hop into whichever one you would like to. All right, so if you're having technical issues hopping into one of the breakout rooms, if you let me know which one you want to go to, I can switch you to that breakout room.
This is Jay Wilshire. Anyone would do. I just don't see an invitation on my
Okay.
end.
Are you interested in learning more about the journal committed to change in on race and ethnicity developments, or do you want to just talk more generally about publishing as a practitioner?
Generally publishing, please.
Okay. Awesome. I will whisk you over there.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
I won the general one too. Is that the one with Calvin and Young?
Yep.
Okay.
I just invited you to go there, so you should be able to hop over there.